Alex Epstein, who is with us now. He is the author of Fossil Future. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hey, Glenn. Great to be back.
I have to tell you, I've been waiting for weeks for this interview because you are the guy. You not only, in your new book, you not only give us the way out, what we should be doing, but you're actually describing what's coming. It's insanity to cut our legs off before we have another chair. You know what I mean? We are turning off all of our energy supply, and it can't be done this way.
I mean, one thing I talk about throughout Fossil Future is this phenomenon of fossil fuel benefit denial. We hear a lot about climate change denial, but the real denial is the huge benefits of fossil fuels, which provide 80% of the world's energy in a world that needs far more energy. And yet we're talking about rapidly eliminating fossil fuels without any evidence of a viable replacement. And that has been the insane strategy that you're talking about.
Yeah, go through some of the benefits of, because everybody's like, oh, fossil fuels, okay, I get it, petroleum, so you got your cars.
Yeah, I mean, the real benefit of fossil fuels, as I talk about in Chapter 4, is a livable world. I mean, people talk about, I'm worried that fossil fuels would make the world unlivable. But you have to recognize first that fossil fuels are the only reason why the world is livable as you know it. So the world naturally is a very deficient and dangerous place. It's very low on resources, and it's very high on threats. We, in what I call the empowered world, experience the world as an abundant and safe place, but that is a very unnatural phenomenon. Specifically, it's a phenomenon of being able to use machines to radically expand and amplify our productive ability. So expand means we can produce things using machines powered by low-cost, reliable energy that we simply can't do with our physical bodies, like provide an incubator that can save a baby's life. And then we also amplify our abilities. We can do things like run a combine harvester that can reap and thresh 1,000 times more wheat than a really good manual laborer can. So we only exist in this abundant and safe world by the grace of all of these machines doing work for us. And that only works to the extent energy is cost effective, which means low cost, reliable, versatile, meaning being able to power any type of machine, and scalable. So providing energy for billions of people in thousands of places. And what we're seeing with this energy crisis is when you make energy less cost effective, everything becomes less cost effective, and you see Europe afraid of winter, which is an embarrassment, and you see real threats of starvation around the world.
Now, people here in America will say, well, it's not going to happen here. That's just because Europe screwed up somehow, and I don't want to think past that. They actually just didn't take the pause on the Paris Climate Accords, right? So they're just a little ahead of us.
Yeah, well, nobody is following the Paris Climate Accords. In a certain sense, we are following it more than they are, but nobody is really following it in terms of rapidly eliminating CO2 emissions. But this is what's scary, is that the net zero agenda has maybe had 1% to 2% success in terms of slowing the growth of fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are still growing around the world, mostly in underdeveloped places that are less restrictive. But in general, fossil fuels are still growing, but they're shrinking in what I call the empowered world, the freer parts of the world. And even that is causing an energy crisis because energy is so important and it's so desperately needed.
So people don't really understand what it means not to have energy. Over in, I think it was Scotland, Amazon and Microsoft shut down some server farms because they just couldn't get enough electricity. We are a country and a civilization that is reliant on our technology, not just our engines, but also our technology. And if you don't have the power, you can't keep it at today's standards. But I don't know if anybody's noticed this. What's happening in the technological world is only getting bigger and more invasive in our lives, not smaller. We need more electricity in the future, not less.
For sure. So this is something I talk about in Chapter 5 of Fossil Future, which includes talking about, it's an expanding pie in terms of the need for energy. The biggest reason is just most people are very energy poor. in the world. We have 6 billion out of 8 billion people who use an amount of energy that you and I would consider unacceptable. We have 3 billion people using less electricity per person than a typical American refrigerator. We have a third of the world using wood and animal dung as their primary fuel for heating and cooking. So we have that. But then as you're pointing out, the parts of the world even that are empowered, we're finding new ways to use energy, and particularly in the realm of information technology, we have rapid growth. And what you're finding with some of these tech companies, it's really tragic, or in a certain sense shameful, is they are huge consumers of electricity who are rightly using more electricity, and yet they're huge boosters of the idea that we can get off fossil fuels rapidly. And one way they do this that's particularly insidious that I talk about in Chapter 6 on alternatives is they claim to be 100% renewable. And the literal way they do this is they pay grids to give them credit for everyone else's solar and wind and to give everyone else the blame for their coal, gas, and nuclear. So this is really shameful, and it's promoting all the wrong ideas, even though the world needs more energy, and they're Exhibit A of why.
Can you talk a little bit about, the problem with our information system that we have now where people believe global warming is a catastrophe, and yet we have more information now, or access to more information than ever before?
Yeah, I have a term I coined called knowledge system to really capture the set of institutions. We often call it the media, but that's too much of a simplification. The set of institutions that are designed to give us expert knowledge and guidance. And I think one key thing is that you have these different phases by which knowledge is acquired and transmitted. And so there's the research phase. But we don't just get things from the research. The research needs to be synthesized by institutions and then disseminated. And then ultimately we evaluate what do we do about it. And with something like climate, what you see is the actual research has quite a few biases, but that research, even as it exists today, in no way justifies this idea of climate catastrophe, and certainly in no way justifies the idea of rapidly eliminating fossil fuels and replacing them specifically with unreliable solar and wind. And yet we get this narrative that, the scientists say we need to get off fossil fuels and replace them with 100% renewable. That doesn't follow at all. And so what's happening is we are getting a distortion from what I call the knowledge system. The institutions we're trusting to get expert knowledge, they're distorting the actual state of the research to the point where we're being told that fossil fuels have no benefits, and yet reality is proving they have huge benefits, and losing those benefits is catastrophic.
Alex, put this on, you've been warning about this for a long time. Put this on what's coming in some sort of scale that people can understand. What is life like in 2030 if we continue down this path? What's it like in 2024, 26 if we continue down this path?
I think there are two versions of this that we need to contemplate. One is less realistic and one is more realistic. So the less realistic one is the one where we all pursue anything resembling net zero, where we all seek to reduce our emissions without a viable replacement. And certainly there's nothing resembling a viable replacement by 2030, particularly because you're basically not allowed to build nuclear now. So if everyone did that, it would be like much, much, much more extreme than what Europe is experiencing right now, because it's just, and you're just seeing it, their power bills are going up by a factor of 4. All these shops are shutting down. You just see the whole economy crash because it's interdependent. And energy is the industry that powers every other industry. So the price of energy determines the price of everything. So you just see prices skyrocketing and things crashing. So there's that happening on a global scale everywhere. But the reason I say it's unrealistic is, let me ask you, do you think China's going to participate in this, Glenn?
No.
Do you think China's going to rapidly eliminate emissions? Is Russia going to?
No. They're going to love this. No. They'll be providing oil for any country that is not, adopting this insanity.
And so this is one of the things I warn about in Chapter 11 of the book, which I call unilateral disempowerment, which Europe is exhibiting right now, which means the freer countries decide, hey, we're going to restrict our emissions, we're going to lower our fossil fuel use. But what happens then is you empower often the less free places like China and Russia. And China in particular loves using huge amounts of coal to produce huge amounts of unreliable solar and wind that then ruin our economy and our way of life. Like, that's great for their ambition of becoming a global superpower by 2049. So that's what I think is the most realistic, is that we kind of sacrifice unilaterally and we make ourselves much less secure, much more dependent on powers that do not wish us well and that are not pro-freedom.
Tell me what we lose besides freedom. Tell me what the average person's life, how is this going to impact? How is this going to change their life?
Well, I would just ask, have you ever been really poor?
Yes, he has, Alex. He has. I've seen it. I've seen it in action.
I have.
No, I'm just saying, like most of us, even who have had success, have had periods where we didn't have much money. I certainly had that in my life, and it will be much, much worse than that. I mean, this is the thing, because you have the element of just becoming much poorer, which people experience even with modest rises in gasoline prices. You cannot afford as much. But part of it's not just so it's this combination of you become poorer, but also you are in a society that is disintegrating. And so what you're like, look at Sri Lanka and other places where you have these riots. What happens is the decline is not this just smooth thing where, okay, I made $100,000 and now I make $60,000. It is chaos. I mean, you just look around the world. Every time you have these fuel price crises, it is chaos. And it's not like America is in a particularly stable state right now, politically and
I had
socially.
noticed.
So we don't. This is not what we need. Now, the nice thing is we have all the physical resources in the world to produce enough energy for a lot of people to have a good life. Like, this is totally a political, it's cultural beneath that, but it's a political phenomenon.
Yes.
So we can produce a lot more fossil fuel. We can produce nuclear energy. We can pursue what I call energy freedom. And that's a lot of my work right now, besides, making clear this idea of a fossil future, is promoting energy freedom policies so that we can get there and also get to new alternatives.
So I only have about a minute left, and I want to ask you about your energy freedom, because you're saying, let us build nuclear power. Let us, real promising alternatives. Let's release the hounds here. Let us do our work. Chances of that, I'm starting to see people love nuclear energy more than I've ever seen it since I was a kid.
I know that's an exciting development. So reality, this crisis, they're helping us open people's minds. If people want to check this out, go to alexepstein.substack.com and you'll see near the top the Energy Freedom Platform. I should say, I used to have no influence at all in D.C., and now I work with something like 300 staffers on policy in different ways. So I'm optimistic that there's a real appetite for a new energy policy that gives us all the energy we need in the present and promotes the positive evolution of energy going forward.
Alex, thank you so much. Thanks for all of your hard work. Founder and president of the Center for Industrial Progress and the author of a great new book. It's called Fossil Future, the real story on energy that no one else will tell you about. And it is important that you hear it so you know what's going on. Alex Epstein.